This is Origin Stories, the Leaky Foundation podcast. I'm Meredith Johnson. Today, we're looking back at one of my favorite fossil discoveries ever, and a profile of Dr. Isaiah Nengo, the scientist who led the team that found it. Since this episode first aired in 2017, Dr. Nengo has continued to do research on the fossil you'll hear about today. He's gained insights into our deep family history and expanded our understanding of childhood in the fossil record. He's also been back to the Turkana Basin several times to find more fossils related to today's story. Part of the reason I chose to revisit this story is that next week, on December 3rd at 11 a.m. Pacific, Isaiah Nengo will be a guest on the Leaky Foundation's new web series, Lunch Break Science. And on that show, he'll be sharing footage from his most recent field season in Kenya. I'll share more details at the end of this episode, but now let's get into it and go way back in time to meet one of our most ancient ape ancestors.
Scientists say they've discovered a 13-million-year-old fossilized ape skull that may answer questions about humankind's evolution. But scientists who discovered this well-preserved infant ape skull say it's a new piece of our evolutionary puzzle.
This is how the media announced the discovery of a fossil called Alesi, found in Kenya. The journal Nature published the find, which is from a time period where there's a big blank spot in the fossil record of our family tree. It tells us something new about the very early evolution of apes, and even shows what the common ancestor of us and all the other living apes might have looked like. Alesi is a big deal.
I remember us sitting there and excavating. Nobody was speaking, in total silence, in total rapture. And you just, it's real.
That's Isaiah Nengo, a primate paleontologist, Leaky Foundation grantee, and the lead researcher on the Alesi discovery. Nengo had been looking for something big in a remote area of Kenya, but he was mainly working from a hunch that there was something to find there. He says with paleontology, you're kind of like a gambler. You can go for years without any big wins.
And you don't find anything particularly special. You find stuff that is important. You find lots of bits and pieces that together, tell important parts of the story. But, you just never find anything that is really amazing or spectacular.
Nengo and his team were searching in a place called Napudet in the Turkana Basin of northern Kenya. Millions of years ago, it was a lush and forested landscape full of all kinds of animals, trees, and plants. Today, Napudet is harsh and dry. Its treeless, rocky outcroppings are surrounded on all sides by wide desert. It looks like it's mostly just rocks, like it could be the surface of Mars. The geology there is made up of hardened layers of volcanic ash. This is why Nengo thought that Napudet might be hiding some great fossils.
So there's a layer of 50 meters of ash that just blanketed the landscape within a very short period. Because everything is buried where they are, in the volcanic ashes are very, very good at preserving fossils. So you don't find much, but what you find is very, very well preserved.
At the time, Nengo was working at Dianza College and the Turkana Basin Institute, which is affiliated with Stony Brook University. He was intrigued by Napudet's prospects, but he had a hard time putting a team together. No one seemed excited about living on the hot, dry landscape of an old volcano. But Nengo got a grant from the Leaky Foundation to explore the site. He couldn't convince any other scientists to come with him. He gathered a small team of skilled Kenyan fossil finders and a cook. The cook even tried to get out of the job, went missing the first day, and had to be coaxed back to stick it out for the rest of the 2-week fossil-finding expedition. And at first, they weren't having much luck. In fact, they didn't find anything at all.
Nothing. We didn't find a single thing. So it's time to go back to the camp, and everybody's kind of in a foul mood.
It's September 4th, near the end of their expedition. And John Ikusi, an experienced Kenyan fossil finder working with Nengo, pulls out some tobacco and rolls a cigarette.
So we say, hey man, you're going to kill us without smoke. Go and smoke up. Go and smoke somewhere else, far away from us. So he walks up ahead of us about maybe a couple 100 yards. And then we see him milling around, walking around the same spot. We yell at him, John, hey, did you find something? And he goes, oh yeah, I think I found something. We ask, what is it? He says, I think it's the knee of an elephant. He brushes the top, and instantly we knew it was a primate skull. We started shouting and screaming and jumping up and down. And then I had everybody pose and take photos, and then it was the end of the day. There was nothing we could do about it, so we covered it up and we went back to sleep.
Actually, Nengo says he didn't sleep much that night. He was too excited about what Ikusi might have found. He knew, even before it was out of the ground, that they had something special. This could be a rare primate fossil skull, the find of his career. Over and over again on this show, you'll hear scientists talk about the joy of discovery. Sometimes it's cautious joy, but often it's described with wonder, the feeling of being the right person in the right place, or of just for a moment knowing something about our human story that no one else knows yet. Of course, these scientists only get to the right place through years and years of study and preparation, and Nengo's no exception. So let's step away from Napudet for a moment and go back to the beginning. Nengo's journey began during high school in Kenya.
We were told that we were going on a field trip to the National Museums of Kenya. We went to the exhibits. And then as part of the visit, we were informed that we were going to hear a talk by a scientist. So we marched into this auditorium. There were several high schools. It was packed capacity. And then this tall white gentleman strolls in and introduces himself as Richard Lickey.
Richard Lickey is a paleoanthropologist and the son of the famous archaeologists Mary and Louis Leakey. Richard, like Louis, grew up in Kenya.
He gave us a talk on plate tectonics, which was still a brand new hypothesis. And he talked about evolution, and I was just fascinated.
Nengo was hooked. He started studying chemistry, physics, biology.
And in biology, we covered everything but evolution, because, Kenya still has, then and even now still has a strong remnant of Christian colonial influence. But I remember reading the evolution chapter on my own, and I thought, this makes sense.
In college, Nengo studied biology, but to get a degree in the subject, a professor had to formally teach him about evolution.
And they could not find any of our zoology or biology professors who wanted to teach it, because they didn't believe in evolution. So some of them were born-again Christians. But anyway, so ultimately the chair of the department, remember his name was Professor Kinoti, took it upon himself to teach it, because otherwise nobody was going to graduate without that course. And I took the class and I was blown away. It was just wonderful.
As part of the evolution class, Professor Kinoti invited Richard Leakey to come back for a debate about the very existence of evolution.
So Richard accepted, came, they had a debate, and we all voted that Richard won. And so I think then I knew that I wanted to do something with fossils.
After graduating and teaching high school a while, Nengo wrote a letter to Richard Leakey and his wife, the paleoanthropologist Meave Leakey. It said simply, I want to be a paleontologist.
And believe it or not, they wrote me back. They said, why don't you come for an interview? So I went to the museum for an interview.
They told him they didn't have a job for him and said they'd call if one opened up.
I think after about a week, I came back and I said, can I volunteer?
The Leakeys said yes. And that very first day, Meave Leakey introduced him to a mysterious era in the study of primate evolution, the Miocene. The Miocene is a geologic period that lasted from about 23 million to 5 million years ago. And it was a time when the Earth was warming, and there was an expansion of plant and animal life, especially in mammals.
And I still remember that day I was following her, and she opened this office door, and she said, "This is going to be our office, and so you're going to help us curate the collection, and you'll learn to identify things, but you also, if things are in place, you can help to put them in the right place. Have fun."
He worked hard for 3 months.
I was the first person in, I was the last person out, and I just had so much fun. It was the myosin. She introduced me to the myosin, and she turned me loose on the myosin collection.
Nengo quickly became obsessed with Miocene Africa, a place teeming with animals. Rhinos, hippos, deer, camels, and apes. At the beginning of the Miocene, the animals would have looked very strange to us. And by the middle of the Miocene, they were starting to look like the animals we would recognize today. The Miocene was a time that's been called the Planet of the Apes. Scientists say there were more than 40 species of apes ranging around Europe, Asia, and Africa. And somewhere in this time period, the common ancestor of us and all living apes emerged. But it's been hard to picture that common ancestor because barely any fossils of Miocene apes have ever been found. Nengo kept wondering about that as a young volunteer, going through every single specimen in the museum's collection of Miocene mammals, one by one.
I remember I would meet with my friends after work, and I would regale them with tales about these wonderful creatures of the past, and many of them didn't understand why I was so excited about these dead things.
Nengo decided he wanted to devote his life to studying the Miocene. Richard Leakey gave him some more books on evolution. Stephen Jay Gould's Ever Since Darwin, and Panda's Thumb.
I was just blown away. I thought, my goodness, this is just great stuff. And I thought, I like the way this guy thinks. He thinks big, and he likes the Miocene like I do.
Gould's work gave Nengo insight into how evolution worked and about the animals in the Miocene. It made him determined to learn more from the scientist. All he had to do was get to the United States. With Leakey's help, he started applying to graduate programs at American universities. The problem was, Nengo had terrible grades.
The first response they got was from Stony Brook. There was a call, and he told Richard, "This is the worst grades I've ever seen in my life." So, we can't get him into the program with these grades, but the best we could do would be to admit him as a special student for a year. But then you'd have to put up the money. And Richard, without blinking, said, "Yeah, I'll put up the money."
Nengo reached out to Harvard University and asked if they'd cut him the same deal. He wanted to try for Harvard because he knew Stephen Jay Gould was there. And Harvard said yes.
I was naive. I didn't quite know who Gould was. I didn't understand what a huge figure he was, So I, in my naivety, I just marched over and knocked on his door.
And Nengo asked if he could study with him.
So I think it's the best education I ever had, one-on-one, once a week for a semester with Stephen Jay Gould. I got to learn evolution from the feet of a real master.
Working with Gould helped Nengo formulate questions that would shape his future career.
So the key question has been, what is man's place in nature? That's what we want to know. So you cannot answer that question without what? Without looking at the apes. You cannot answer the question of humans' place in nature just by looking at humans. So if we are looking for the missing links or the ancestors that connects humans to chimpanzees, to the lesser apes, the gibbons, all of that are to be found in the Miocene.
Gould died in 2002. Meanwhile, Nengo earned his PhD and ended up doing research in Kenya, looking for those Miocene fossils, and trying to answer the big question of what was the common ancestor of all living apes, including us. Did it emerge in Africa? And what did it look like? And I like to think that Gould would have been thrilled if he could have seen Isaiah Nengo the morning of September 5th, 2014, coming out of his tent after a restless night. to go and excavate the fossil skull that John Ikusi had found the day before. Nengo's team woke up early. They quickly ate their breakfasts and rushed to the excavation site by 6 a.m., where they had a surprise waiting for them.
We see a crowd of local folks. They just learned that we were there, and they wanted to know what the hell we were doing and how comes we hadn't informed them that we were coming. I said, "Oh no, we're not oil people. We're just with the TBI. We're looking for fossils." And they insisted that we had to hire all of them, otherwise we were not going to be allowed to do any work. I said, "Oh, come on, man, we cannot hire 50 people. That's not, we don't have the kind of money."
So they negotiated.
We were done negotiating at around noon. And then we had agreed that we were going to hire one person the following season. We're going to give the old guys a bag of tobacco, and we're going to slaughter 2 goats for the kids and women. And everybody was satisfied.
Nengo's team got started on the excavation. They worked and didn't stop until the fossil was out of the ground.
As we excavate, you are expecting it's going to end here, This is where it's going to end. It's just going to be the top of it. But then you brush it a little bit more, and there's more. There's more.
What they pulled out of the ground that day was the most complete fossil ape skull ever discovered. Ever. They took the fossil to the National Museums of Kenya for cleaning, carefully packed in a shallow wooden box filled with volcanic sediment. It took months of meticulous work and a large international team of experts to learn just how spectacular this find really was.
So the first time that I saw the fully cleaned specimen was several months later in Nairobi. I was floored. I was just amazed. It's amazing.
This fossil truly is amazing, and it's tiny. It's the skull of a baby ape, and it's very cute, with much of its face taken up by its big eye sockets. Some people online noted its resemblance to a slee stack from the old TV show Land of the Lost.
Come on, get going!
Its round eyes just kind of stare out at you, and it just looks like what it is, a baby ape.
When you hold Alesi in the palm of your hand, and because it's about the size of a lemon, it fits in the palm of your hand, it is awesome in the original sense of the word.
This is Ellen Miller. She's a Leaky Foundation grantee and an anthropology professor at Wake Forest University in North Carolina. She's part of Nengo's research team.
When you're doing this kind of work and you go many, many days and you don't find anything and it's very hot, and then you see something and you bend down to kind of brush it off. I am the first person to see that in 13 million years, and that is never wasted on me. That's cool.
Miller is an expert on Miocene fossils, and as someone who's studying the early evolution of apes, she says Alesi is a game-changing discovery.
It's a really singular find, and it's going to be a touchstone for all future studies in primate evolution.
Up until now, there's been a huge gap in the fossil record when it comes to apes, especially from Africa during this time period.
First of all, we don't have any fossil ape skulls between about 17 and 7 million years old, and we have some partial palettes, some faces, but nothing complete like this. But it's also just shocking to find a skull from a baby because the bones are so delicate. The chance of having something like that fossilized is astronomically small.
The team could tell Alesi was a baby when it died. The plates of the cranium hadn't yet fused together, and the broken-off roots of baby teeth were still there, along with one adult tooth just starting to emerge. When Isaiah Nengo took the fossil to France to be scanned with X-rays 6 billion times stronger than medical X-rays, they found this fossil was almost more incredible on the inside. Scientists could now clearly see the shape of the brain cavity, so they could study what Alesi's brain was like. They also found that the tiny, bony labyrinths of the inner ears were both still there, perfectly preserved. These little bones work like a gyroscope inside your head, telling you what's up and what's down. And by comparing their shape to the ones in living apes today, scientists can tell a lot about how Alesi would have moved through the world.
So despite the fact that it kind of looks like a gibbon, gibbons are known for that sort of really acrobatic, really fast swinging from branch to branch, and Alesi would not have moved like that.
And then there were the teeth, which are one of the most informative parts of a fossil.
Almost all of the adult teeth were fully formed and are sitting up in the crypt. So with the high 3D imaging, we could see all of the teeth perfectly in the skull, so we know something about what Alesi's diet would have been like.
Miller says the teeth showed Alesi would have been a fruit eater and didn't have adaptations for specializing in eating leaves. And to me, this next thing is one of the most amazing things. Because the images were the most detailed of any fossil ever, they could see through the unerupted adult teeth inside the skull and actually count the growth lines in the teeth, which are like rings in a tree trunk.
Which allows us to estimate the age of the individual to within a few days. That's just not been done before.
From that, they could tell that Alesi lived for 485 days, or 16 months, before dying and being buried by a blanket of volcanic ash for 13 million years. The teeth also revealed that Alesi belonged to the genus Neanzopithecus, part of a group of extinct apes called Neanzopithecines that lived between 25 million and 8 million years ago. But there were enough differences in the teeth to put it in a new species, and every new species gets a new name. Coming up with that name became Isaiah Nengo's job.
I wanted to name it something that has a local ring, but some of the obvious names had already been taken, like Turkana, Afropithecus. Those were already gone. So I was sending emails to John Ekusi, the finder, who, by the way, is quite an amazing fossil finder and a scientist. I mean, he knows those taxa really well, and just a really amazing person.
He sends Ekusi 5 ideas, and Ekusi rejects them. They're just not right. So he sends 5 more.
And one of them was Ancestor. So he comes back, and their ancestor is Alesi.
Since Alesi means ancestor in the Turkana language, Nengo decided to call the new species Alesi.
So I thought, that's the name. And I asked my wife, well, what do you think? And she thought, that's perfect. That's a good name.
Isaiah Nengo has been back to Napadet several times to look for more ape fossils, and he's put together a team of experts to study every part of the Alesi fossil, and he's formed a working group to study babies in human evolution. Since this episode first aired, Dr. Nengo has taken a new position at Stony Brook University, where he's the associate director of the Turkana Basin Institute with Richard Leakey. And Alesi? It's now in the National Museums of Kenya, where Nengo first went on that field trip in high school. Thanks to Dr. Isaiah Nengo of Stony Brook University and the Turkana Basin Institute, and Dr. Ellen Miller of Wake Forest University for sharing their work. You can learn more and see pictures of Alesi on our website at leakyfoundation.org. We even have a cool animation that lets you see inside the skull. Links are in your show notes. And be sure to tune in to Lunch Break Science on Thursday, December 3rd, 2020 at 11 a.m. Pacific to learn more about Alesi and see footage from Isaiah Nengo's recent fieldwork in the Turkana Basin. The links are in your show notes. Origin Stories is a project of the Leaky Foundation. The Leaky Foundation is a nonprofit organization that funds human origins research and shares discoveries like Alesi. You can support this show and the science we talk about by making a tax-deductible donation to the Leaky Foundation. Visit leakyfoundation.org/donate. That's LEAKEY foundation.org. And thanks to the Anna Gordon Getty Foundation, your donation will be matched. So please visit leakyfoundation.org/donate. If you like our show, please rate and review us on Apple Podcasts or tell a friend about us. We'd love to get more 5-star ratings so more people can find the show. This episode was produced by me and Shuka Kalantari. Our editor is Julia Barton. Sound design by Katie McMurrin. Our theme music is by Henry Nagel. Ellen Miller's interview was recorded in the studio of WFDD in North Carolina. We'll be back in December with 2 new episodes, one about Neanderthals and another about exercise and evolution. Thanks for listening.